Okay, so we're diving deep into Irish education savings today. We've got a ton of info to unpack,
We do.
and it's all about making this work for your family.
Absolutely.
Making sure that your kids have the best opportunities.
Yeah.
And one thing that really surprised me prepping for this, is just how early those education costs actually start.
Oh, yeah.
We all know about college tuition and all that,
What?
but did you know that even primary schools often ask for these so-called voluntary
Yeah.
contributions? We're talking like 250 to 500 euro per year per child. It makes you wonder how voluntary they actually are.
It's a good point. I mean, the Irish education system, it's free in theory, right?
Right.
But then you've got these additional expenses that can pile up quickly. So, yeah, it's not always as straightforward as it seems.
It's about seeing the whole picture.
Ex-
And speaking of seeing the whole picture, I was looking at some data from Zurich Life Assurance. And get this, sending a child to college in Dublin now, it can cost you over $20,000 a year.
Wow.
That's like some European universities.
It's a significant investment. And, that 20,000 figure, that's primarily for tuition and like really basic living expenses.
Right.
But then you've got books, travel, all the social activities. Those hidden costs add up quickly, an extra few thousand easily.
Which is why I'm really glad we're talking about this, because it's easy to fixate on just that tuition number.
Right.
But there's so much more to it. But okay, before we get too overwhelmed, let's talk about the good stuff, the support systems. I was actually pleasantly surprised by the range of government schemes available,
Yeah, there are quite a few.
which I had no idea about.
Yeah, so for college students, there's the Free Fees Initiative, which, as the name suggests, covers the cost of tuition for eligible students.
Okay.
And then you've got the SUSI grant, which helps with living costs. That stands for Student Universal Support Ireland.
Right. And what about for people like me, who may be thinking about going back to school later in life,
Oh, absolutely.
like a career change or upskilling?
Yeah, so there's the Back to Education Allowance, which can be a really helpful resource.
Okay.
It provides financial support for adults who want to pursue further education.
That's fantastic.
So there are options out there.
There are options, but it's about knowing the details, right?
Yeah.
Because I imagine the eligibility criteria, the funding models, those can change.
Absolutely. And that's something to keep in mind. What's available today might not be there tomorrow, so it's important to plan accordingly.
Which reminds me of something else I came across in the research, which is even if you are diligently saving, like you're doing everything right,
Yeah.
you have to make sure your returns are outpacing the rising cost of education.
Oh, absolutely.
Because otherwise you're losing ground. Inflation is a real thing.
It's a silent thief, isn't it? You think you're getting ahead, but that's not always the case. A guaranteed return on some savings products might not look so great when you factor in how much those education costs are going up each year.
It's about making your money work for you.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the costs, the support. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of saving.
The exciting part.
Right. Because going through all this information, I felt a bit like, wandering through a maze.
It can be overwhelming.
There are so many options. Thankfully, we've got you here to guide us.
Hopefully. So we're talking regular savings accounts, state-backed products, investment funds, investment bonds,
So much to consider.
each with their own pros and cons.
Exactly. So let's break it down. Let's start simple. With those regular savings accounts. Seems like a good starting point, right?
Sure, they're easy to understand, low risk. You put your money in, it's safe.
Safe, but
But the returns are generally quite low, especially with the interest rates these days.
right, inflation might actually eat away at your savings over time.
Exactly. You're not really making progress if your money isn't growing at least as fast as inflation.
So maybe not ideal if you're looking for that big growth.
Hmm.
What about those state-backed savings products? The National Solidarity Bond, for example.
Yes, the National Solidarity Bond. So that offers that government guarantee.
A security.
Exactly. It's considered very low risk because you're essentially lending money to the government.
Makes sense.
The returns might not be as high as, say, investing in the stock market, but you've got that peace of mind.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Now, investment funds always kind of intrigue me. Higher potential returns, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
So with investment funds, your money is pooled with other investors' money and then invested in a mix of assets, stocks, bonds, things like that.
Diversification, right?
Exactly. And that diversification can help to manage risk and potentially lead to higher returns compared to just a regular savings account.
But there's always a but, right?
Right. Well, higher potential returns usually come with higher risk. The value of your investment can go down as well as up.
Okay, so you have to be comfortable with a bit of a roller coaster ride.
Exactly. It's not for the faint of heart. And then, of course, you've got investment bonds, which we touched on earlier.
Right, those seem intriguing, but a bit complicated.
They can be a bit complex. It's like a life insurance policy with an investment element built in. You pay a premium for a certain period, and that money gets invested.
And the tax efficiency is a big plus, right?
Yeah, they can be quite tax efficient, which makes them attractive for long-term savings goals like
Right.
education.
Long-term being the key word there. Speaking of long-term, I found that infographic on age-based asset allocation really interesting. It's like a roadmap for adjusting your investment strategy as your child grows.
Right, because your investment strategy for a 5-year-old is going to look very different from your strategy for a 15-year-old.
Makes sense. So when they're younger, you can afford to take on a bit more risk, right?
Exactly. A more aggressive approach, potentially higher returns because you have more time to recover if the market takes a dip.
And then as they get closer to college age,
You start to gradually shift to a more conservative approach.
less risk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to protect those savings as you get closer to needing them for those college expenses.
You know, as we've been going through all this, I realize there's a whole other side to this we haven't really touched on.
Oh, absolutely. Saving is just one piece of the puzzle.
It's like we get so focused on putting money aside for education that we forget about the bigger financial picture.
It's easy to get tunnel vision.
Right, like what about managing our own finances, our household debt, while we're also trying to save for our kids' education?
It's a balancing act for sure.
Mhm.
We're talking mortgages, car loans, credit card debt, all those things can impact your ability to save effectively.
It's about finding that balance,
Yes.
right, between saving for the future and managing the present.
Exactly. And that's where having a holistic financial plan comes in.
And speaking of holistic planning, we can't forget about insurance.
Oh, insurance. It's not the most exciting topic, but it's crucial.
It's like that safety net you hope you never need, but you're really grateful to have it if things go wrong.
Exactly. Because life happens, right? Job loss, illness, unexpected expenses. Having insurance can provide that buffer, that peace of mind, knowing that your child's education savings won't be completely derailed if something unexpected happens.
And it's not just about protecting your income, is it? There's also health insurance to consider, especially if you're thinking about education abroad.
Absolutely. International health insurance can be quite expensive, so it's something to factor in early on.
Right, because those costs can add up quickly. And while we're on the topic of things that are often overlooked, what about the legal side of things? The research mentioned things like trusts and guardianship.
Yeah, that's where it can get a bit more complicated. And honestly, it's an area where seeking professional advice is really valuable.
Like a financial advisor or a solicitor who specializes in this stuff?
Exactly. They can help you navigate the ins and outs of setting up a plan that's tailored to your family's specific needs and circumstances.
Because ultimately it's about having that peace of mind, knowing that you've got all your bases covered.
Exactly. And feeling confident in your decisions. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the key takeaway here is that planning for your child's education is a journey.
It's not a sprint.
Definitely not. It's about taking those steps, starting early, staying informed, seeking expert advice when you need it. And remember, it's not just about the money, it's about giving your child the best possible opportunities for their future.
Well said. We hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge and the tools to start planning for your child's education. It's a journey, but you've got this.